Welcome back, Matt, to another episode of What Next? I'm a software engineer. What next? Thanks for joining me again.
Thanks for having me. I'm really enjoying our summer shorts, and I'm even wearing shorts today. It's officially it was officially shorts day the other day. First day of wearing shorts in the year in London. Can't go back now.
Yeah.
Shorts all the way through to all now.
Yeah, I won't get you to show me your shorts, but I am curious as to the this week. Classically trained. That looks like a pretty old shirt. That one, is it, or is it a retro style?
I think it's meant to be. Yeah, I think it's meant to look old. I bought it the other day.
All right.
In preparation for this call.
Oh, right. That's very good. I like that. My shirt, not that is on theme, does look like the same color as my background, and that was not deliberate. In fact, I don't think it's actually doing anything.
So just a suspended head. Just a suspended head.
I'm floating. I didn't really plan that one through. I wanted to talk this week about a post that I did on LinkedIn. In fact, let me see if I can even share it with you.
Getting a lot of traction, James, with your 8-bit themed posts on LinkedIn. I'm liking the theme and the response. Yeah, I'm liking the vibe.
Yeah.
Very good.
I think that they're so easy to generate now with ChatGPT. So I posted this 2 weeks ago. It was about a candidate that I had reached out to, said they didn't want to do coding. They were quite direct, and that didn't bother me at all. It was fine. It was more just the fact that he said he was interested in the role made me think candidates who might be interested in these type of roles, particularly in early stage startups where there's quite a bit of demand, are going to probably have to expect that they're going to have to do some form of coding as part of that interview process. And if they don't want to do that, that's fine, but they are going to rule out options. And obviously that caused a little bit of debate. You'll see if I scroll down a lot of impressions there, which is a basic post might get a few thousand impressions, whereas this is well way up. It's probably one of the the highest impressions I've had. And plenty of people were supportive or just making their point, but I guess a lot of people were.
It's funny. It's amusing. I just noticed that someone has commented on that is someone I know. It's like our LinkedIn circles are overlapping.
Oh, really? Yeah, probably because you liked it or commented or
no,
something.
Maybe
it went into their network.
Yeah.
So anyway, I wanted to get your view because if you read the post, I'm not actually saying anything about whether I agree with whether they should be used or not. It's just the reality of all the clients I work with. There is some form of coding interview as part of the interview process, and there must be a reason they're doing it.
Well, as we all know, LinkedIn is the same as YouTube and everything else. No one actually reads the actual post, right? They just see it as an opportunity to give out their few opinions for the most part. So that doesn't. No,
they do read. They read software engineering recruiter has an opinion on interviews, and that's enough. I'm gonna get.
So for the record, I know James has expressed to me in private and in public that his opinion was not captured by that particular post. It was merely an observation of this being an interesting topic. And so let me. Where do I dig into this? This is a really hot topic. It's a real trigger topic. I mean, for engineers, there's folks on one side of the table, mostly on the hiring side, who think this is mandatory, and you've got some engineers on the other side of the table who just immediately reject this as appropriate. And I'm going to show my colours here a little bit because I have some sympathy for the idea that live coding is not reflective of a real programming job. And so a few of the comments in there that were accusing you falsely of advocating for live coding were saying that it's not the job. Actually, you didn't say that, but also I think I have some sympathy for folks who make that point. Coding under pressure is like that. People watching you is not really what a job is like in the real world. And so if you're selecting only on that dimension, you're probably selecting for something that's not actually like the real job. So let me get that out on the table, right? So having been been on both sides of
it's like me sending an email, having my manager sitting behind me, reading while I get that. I get there's pressure there.
Yeah. And look, it's not that there isn't pressure writing software. There's often pressure, right? And I've seen environments, one particular environment where there is enormous pressure and immediacy, or two examples is trading floor type development environments where you're doing you're working intraday on software that's being used on a trading floor. There are people around losing or making money, moment to moment, and there's enormous pressure, right? And another example, a different example might be any kind of security response, threat response type environment where things are literally burning, right? And you're being watched while you're trying to fix it. So there are environments that are very, very much have eyes on you when you're writing code, but generally speaking, if you're working in an enterprise environment or even in a startup, very rarely are you sitting there with someone watching what you're doing coding, right? So it's a little bit artificial to do a live coding thing. But the question that this asks is if, okay, I said I have some sympathy for people who don't like it, and that's kind of how I feel about it. What do you do? What do you do in order to discriminate between good and bad when it comes to interviewing engineers? And I think that's a topic we probably should dive into a little bit.
I agree. And I think no one really loves the coding interviews, but from a recruitment perspective, like, you have to figure out a way to filter people. And you can't, if for every applicant that applies, you can't do, say, a long conversation or 2-hour conversation with a hiring manager, because we just don't have time. And therefore, so you start with, I guess, a CV screen. And then you move on to, quite often it's like an initial call, like could be one of the co-founders if it's early stage, or one of the hiring managers. And it's like, get a feel for the work they've done. And, does it sound like the right environment, but not deep technical? And then it moves on to some form of technical screen before multiple technical rounds. So it's a method to, I guess, filter people out. And I just can't see how you can't do, if you're having to run multiple interviews, you have to do that. Otherwise, you have to interview every person that applies that you think might be okay, and spend 2 hours having that deep conversation, which you can't do. So I think that's where it comes back to. I think that's why these companies do these screenings.
Yeah. So what I found was a better approach to, because everything you said there is 100% true, right? And it's even worse now. I think we were talking in the setup about sort of, like, say, pre-2020 or pre-2019 and post-2020 environments, right? One was very much a seller's market, and the other one is very much, as we are today, very much a buyer's market, right? So the behavior required of software engineers applying for jobs is very different in those two time periods. And maybe some folks in today's environment are still behaving as if it were pre-2020, right? And we can come back to that. But one of the things we did back in the pre-COVID time, when it was very much a seller's market, was, rather than do live coding, what we would do is we would spend a bit of time looking at the person's public coding profile. So go and look at GitHub, go and look at any blog posts they had, go and look at any open source project contributions that they may have made. And to the extent that live coding is reflecting how people code, which I don't really think it is, what you can go and look at is what is their code that's been accepted and checked in and published. What does it look like? And I think that actually gives you a better idea. Now, there is problems with that as well. Yeah. So this is far from perfect. There's not everyone sits down and makes open source contributions, and also the code in open source software is not quite the same as often as what is in enterprise software or software that a startup may build. So again, it's imperfect, but I found in my experience, and when I've had to do this, and actually the signal that I'm looking for is, can this person write code? And what I want to see is the output of that, and I want to see some actual code that's running somewhere or has been used. That was as good or better a signal than putting someone under pressure in a live coding example. Now, the second thing I would say is that when I've been hiring for people, very rarely are you just hiring for someone to write code. And I think one of the comments in your on your post there was, coding is not my whole job. And in fact, and linking back to some of these topics we've been talking about in the last few weeks on sort of LLM powered or LLM assisted coding, in actual fact, I think we're moving to a world where the time cost of the code, the actual writing the code, the bit where your fingers are writing code, that's kind of dropping drastically, because these days what I can do is more about, how do I instruct an LLM to give me the code rather than me sitting down there and writing it? And I know that's probably please don't write letters to me on your opinions on that, right? Send them all to James. He's used to it. He's used to getting letters for the controversial opinions. And so, the actual code, the coding side of it I think increasingly, like the actual, the manual typing of code, I think increasingly becomes less and less of the job. And even today already, before we get to LLM assisted coding, it's not the whole job. A lot of the time is spent using tools. It's just spent being a human and interacting with other people and understanding what needs to be done and working in your head what needs to be done, drawing some pictures on a whiteboard about what we're going to do. People coming together and agreeing on things, and that putting someone in a live coding scenario, especially under the pressure of an interview, for me sounds A, artificial, B, likely to generate false signals that are not particularly useful on the for you to discriminate against, and C, they really do put a certain type of person who they just do not respond well at all in that environment, and they're going to come across looking like a muppet, when in actual fact they could be one of the better programmers that you might be likely to see.
Yep. One thing I would say is that all the clients that I work with, I can't speak for everyone, it's just one component, and it's one of the early components usually. So it's a way to see, okay, is this person technically at the bar? And I don't think any of them set the coding interview up. It's usually some form of algorithm that they want them to write. They try and keep it quite casual. So they'll have a conversation, you can talk through what you're doing. They're not trying to put the pressure on them, but they need to get some type of signal at where they're at. And they may be able to, in some cases, explain how they would go about it, what they would do, and maybe write a little bit, but not actually go just sit there for half an hour and code while the other person watches, and which I think is what a lot of people are imagining or maybe have experienced. But yeah, it's not the only component. It's just one of the early components, because I guess it's an obvious one. Like, there's no point in screening someone for culture round first, like an actual on-site cultural round, when we just don't even know if they're technically good. So I guess it's an obvious one to do. Yeah, it's I get it. I get why it causes hot debate, but I just don't understand what the alternative is. If you were running a startup now and you had this product you wanted to build and you had to select an engineer, and let's say your referrals are out of the question, you have to run it through a like you post a job ad or you use a recruiter, how are you going to do that process? Let's say you've got 100 applicants. Okay, you screen out down to 10 CVs. Okay, I want to meet with these 10 people. What are you going to do?
So I literally did this the other day. I literally did this the other day. Right?
Perfect,
so it's a very, very relevant question. I needed to get some help on a project I'm working on, and I put a little note out to my what I thought was a niche audience, and got way more people applying than I could possibly handle. And then I did the insane thing, which was I interviewed, I think it was 18 people back to back in half-hour blocks on the one day. And it was exhausting. Absolutely and utterly exhausting. But what I didn't do was I didn't get them to live code. What I got them to do was to talk to me through. I got them to find some code that they were comfortable talking about, and I just got them to talk to me about it as if they were introducing me to the code base and we were going to work on something together. So it was very much and I had a couple of questions, like trigger questions that I knew I wanted to ask in that process. Explain to me the difference between this and this, or how would I go, talk me through what happens when you click that button on the web page, show me in the code where, that sort of thing. And that worked pretty well. The job was really difficult because I should have realized this beforehand, but the pond I was fishing in, although it was a kind of a little pond relative to some of the other tech stacks, the folks who are in that pond are on average way better than the average people in some bigger ponds. And so almost without exception, I think there was maybe 3 out of the 15 or 16 people I spoke to that were non-starters. The rest were all great. And what I ended up selecting on was basically could this, there was some commercial questions that weren't the money. It wasn't how much the person was charging, because there was a variety of rates. It was actually could we pay this person in a way that made sense for the way the business was set up. Actually ended up being the criteria, which is a weird thing to select on, because everyone else was actually really strong.
If you were going to do it again now, what would you do differently?
I think, look, that's a really good question. I think I'd probably go to you, James. Can you here's my criteria. Can you do it for me? Because I don't want to do these.
I didn't set that up, by the way.
No, that wasn't.
No, purely if you were doing it again yourself, now you know what you know.
Yep.
Do you think that's what... I'm leading to something here, but you go on. What would you do differently?
No. I think I'd follow my own advice, right? What I would do next time round is I wouldn't try and interview 15 people in one day. I would desk check them via open source software stuff. And if unfortunately people didn't have some kind of public profile that I could have a look at, that would not necessarily say something bad about them, but it would be simply the fact that I couldn't select based on their lack of profile, and therefore I wouldn't
it
be
just
able
rules
to.
them out
I wouldn't
for that reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like people that refuse to do a coding exercise. Fine, you could be the best engineer in the world, but you're going to get ruled out for some roles because.
The one thing that I really reject, like vehemently reject, is this idea of like stand up and implement the sieve of Erasthenes, on a whiteboard with this whiteboard marker now, or whatever the virtual version of that is, or the video call version of that is. That is just nonsense, right? Because I would, if someone ever asked me for that, and I kind of had the luxury of being a bit facetious, I'd probably just go up and write LMGTFY hashtag, right? Let me Google that for you, right? And stick it up on the board, and that'd be my answer. Because no one, I don't know any person who's ever had that as a task, as a legitimate task in a work environment, professional programming environment. It just doesn't happen, right?
Yeah. I would say that this is my advice, or observation, firstly, the market has changed from a few years ago where
agree.
Candidates probably could be a lot more picky. They had more options, whereas now there's a lot of candidates applying for roles. So the bar is becoming higher. It is harder. There's more processes. You would probably, for the clients that I work, you'd probably expect at least 4, maybe 5 processes, which gone a few years ago, it might be 2. So I think that you kind of have to expect these processes. But what I would also add to that is don't feel like people are out to get you or trick you, because a lot of these companies are purely, they want you to succeed and they don't want to make the environment difficult for you. But it is a coding round, or it is going to expect you to do something written, but treat it just like you would if you were going to work that day, and try not to get anxious about it, because the anxiety is what's going to make it difficult. Easy for me to say.
And I would say for hiring, then let me jump on the other side of the table, right? Like software engineer, from being a software engineer being hired to being on the other side of the table being a hiring manager hiring software engineers. I think the way to frame it, rather than say, oh, we're going to do a live coding, right, is we would like to walk through some code with you, maybe look at a failing test, maybe do a PR, maybe see if we can debug something and find something wrong, or here's some code we've got in a repo that is failing. Talk us through how you would deal with that in the real world, right? And make it like we're going to do a virtual pairing exercise, or frame it up that way rather than a live coding, because I think you're sending a much better signal about collaboration and about something that's actually really like the real world. Coming in and saying, I could just write some code to do this thing, it's just not how, I can understand why people get upset with that kind of request.
I think also another thing is, and this is probably more advice to companies, but don't have your first stage of an interview process where you either have a coding interview or you send them a task, because the candidate kind of wants to have a little bit of an understanding. Now, it could be a call with an internal recruiter, or it could be a call with one of the hiring managers, or in my case, usually it's with the CTO. And it's like, it's a good use of 20 minutes or half an hour of, I think they can see from a cultural perspective, does this person think they're going to fit in the environment? Like, tell me a bit about the work you've done, and then tell them what this role is going to be about. So hopefully there's some buy-in. And then if it all sounds exciting, hopefully that candidate wants to get on and do a task.
Invested.
But if stage 1 is, here's a task, we don't want to speak to you until you've done that, that's where I think candidates have a real right to be annoyed and not want to go and touch it.
The other thing, like, just to throw a kind of spanner in the works before we wrap it up, but the other thing to think about is a long probation period or probation, right? And I think this is actually where we ended up in my previous life. We ended up with this basic philosophy was that we would do the best we possibly could to hire people because we needed to move so quickly. And as you said, if you didn't move quickly, they were gone. And then we would set them up with a reasonably long probation period, because that's actually what it's like to work on the team. You get to see the person on a day-to-day. And if you've got a longish like probation period within reason and properly accounted for and paid for and all that, I'm not suggesting anything other than doing it completely properly. But that long probation period just gives you the opportunity to go, okay, look, we've seen what we needed to see now, and this isn't going to work out for us. This isn't the right job for you. Okay, we're gonna part ways, and that's a lot higher investment on the hiring side because there's costs involved with that and time. The biggest one is time. But I don't know if ever any foolproof any foolproof way to get this right. So you have to take a few different attacks on the problem to get it right.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think anyone's come up with the perfect solution, but I do think candidates that want to work in ambitious startups or companies that have a high bar to be around those type of engineers are going to expect that is the norm, at least in the foreseeable future, that you're going to need to do these. And a lot of them are allowing you to use AI tools. It's allowing you to be in that environment that you would normally be in.
I tell you what, if someone came to me, if I had to put a job, like just say I was in a situation where someone like, here's a live coding interview, and someone came back to me and said, you know what, I don't think this is the right way to evaluate me for this role. Here's what I think is the right way to evaluate me for this role. I'd be going, wow, okay, this person's really thinking ahead and they're proactive and they understand the nuance. And I'd be like, that would be like, hang on, put this person at the top of the queue because they've shown some initiative and some sort of broader understanding about what's going on.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The only thing I would say is it's going to depend, because if they said that to, say, someone who's just reviewing CVs or the recruiter that doesn't care, will just be like, no, fit in. But yeah, if you're managing that process yourself, I would say that would be a good approach. Or why can't I do that? Or why shouldn't I do that? Or maybe it's a time commitment. I can't do that, but I can send you some code. You just have to show some passion and interest. Often it does go a long way if you show an interest. But the problem is a lot of people don't. They just assume that it's not going to be right for them because they don't want to do a coding exercise, or they just rule themselves out because they don't. And it's not great because some people probably don't perform well in those kind of conditions, but that is the reality at the moment. I'm conscious of time, so I don't know what the solution is, but all I would say is, in answer to my post, not my opinion. I had a lot of people come back at me and say, like, this is why I don't use recruiters or whatever. All I was saying is this is the reality of the market. So be open to it. If you want to work in those type of environments, just be prepared to do those type of things, but don't see them as a scary task. It's just another thing it's just another day's work. That's probably the attitude you need to take. There is ways you can practice if you know what type of problem you're going to get. Like if it's an algorithm type problem, I'm sure there's ways that you can do to sort of get yourself in that sort of mindset. But at the end of the day, it's usually pretty logical, simple stuff. It's just a quick check. Are you at the level we need?
All right.
So yeah, thank you guys for joining. Don't forget to subscribe, and we look forward to
mandatory self-promotion shill.
Yeah.
Please subscribe.
Please subscribe, or tell us, what you don't like or do like. That's the next step if you want to email us.
And I will say, I will just do a direct call out for a couple of people that took the time to send us a personal email to James and I, thanking us for the podcast. I must admit that was very, very good to hear, and it's glad at least someone was enjoying what we were saying.
Yeah, we've had a few people say some nice things, so yeah, we really appreciate that. All right, we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Yes, indeed.